Well, Diana was an ace cook. Diana has taught cookery. She was the sergeant in charge of the Honourable Artillery Company Officers' Mess in 1940.
I can't see Diana as a sergeant. I can't see you as a
No,
sergeant.
she didn't either much.
Diana. I can't see you as a sergeant, if you were one. How difficult is it for you to accept your mother's illness?
Oh, I have no difficulty in accepting it. It's one of those things that happen. That's life. I don't believe in a conspiracy theory or of life. These things happen.
Do you see your father coping well?
Oh yes, I think he copes admirably. Yes, he looks after Mum extremely well, and he makes sure that he has some time to himself. But he certainly does seem to appears from a distance to be coping very well.
When you say from a distance, that's because you live in Cambridge and he lives in London.
That's right.
Do you mean that you've also kept yourself at a distance from it? You don't mean that quite, do you?
Well, no, not quite. But Mum became ill after we left home, after my brother and I left home, and so you know, we're not a close family in the sense that we go into each other's houses with great regularity, so that to that extent illness hasn't impinged on us.
I mean, do you feel that you should support more than you do, or that have you got any kind of guilt? And why should you have any, but have you any?
No, I don't have any guilt. I probably don't have any guilt about anything I do, even the things that I shouldn't.
But you were telling me that earlier that you felt that because your father was coping so well, there was no need.
Well, it is a sort of philosophy of ours that if somebody's dealing with a problem, you leave them to deal with it. And to that extent, you know, Dad's dealing with the problem. If he wants help, he will ask for it.
But you know, that's the sort of thing that some people find really a strain on them. You know, because it is spooky. I mean, you know, to wake up and your parent, I go and take a cup of tea and your parent says, hello, and I say, hello, how are you, Mum?
Yes.
Or Dad, you know, and they don't know who you are, and they don't know who they are. So you have to start from scratch. And that's quite difficult for people.
I can imagine. I think that the case of younger generations looking after older generations is much more difficult for everybody, because there is a role reversal. It is not natural for one's parents to be looked after by their children. So they, or in fact to be organised by their children, so they can feel resentment. The children have naturally developed full lives of their own, and they don't want to get involved looking after their parents. I think looking after in-laws must be even worse. I think that is a much more difficult situation than looking after one's lifetime partner. I don't feel any resentment because there's no earthly point. You might, I mean, one doesn't feel resentment if it rains if you want the sun out. At least I don't.
I've now had the experience of two parents with Alzheimer's, and I find it, I do think it's, I mean, it's something I can't easily cope with, because you are mourning somebody who is alive. And I'm wondering how you stand up to the strain of this woman you've really loved, and there she is, half there, physically all there, but I find it really very, very tricky.
Well, I suppose, as I think I said at the Alzheimer disease conference, I deceive myself. I expect I don't face it, but I know that I shall never see Diana again, if you know what I mean. But I suppose, well, I think it's a matter of self-deception.
I know.
And that I keep myself extremely busy doing all sorts of things, mixing with people. If I talk on the telephone to countless Alzheimer widows, I say countless, perhaps it's not as countless as all that, but I do know a number of Alzheimer widows and widows of Parkinsonians and so on. Diana listens to me as if it's something interesting that I'm saying, and then, because she's so kind, says, "You're so good to these people, telephoning them. They must like it." And you see, it's lovely to have these snatches of her former self.
I hate to stop doing anything, age notwithstanding.
Do you think that it's partly that she has got used to trusting you, that now she can so completely?
Well, I think so.
Yeah.
I think you have reasonable faith, don't you, darling?
Yes, of course I have.
Yes. Yeah.
Couldn't have done better.
No. Oh, that's nice.
Thank you, dear. That's very nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My studio guest today is my sister Sylvia Bartlett. A few years ago, when our mother was no longer able to live on her own because of Alzheimer's, Sylvia and her husband Mike cared for her in their home. Recently, we've had to come to another decision, and it wasn't very easy.
Oh, it was extremely difficult. It was very painful. It was also, in my opinion, a defeat. But I really felt as anger, a sort of overwhelming anger, that this disease had defeated me, defeated Mum, all of us, you, Graham. You know, it was a disease that robbed Mum of all her memories, 60 years, as if she'd never, ever existed. But what was worse, as if we had never existed.
No, I know. But the point was that you had Mum for 2 years, right? And I watched, I mean, I came a lot and shared it, but not the responsibility which you had, all the responsibility. The thing was that you thought you could actually really see her through to her death, didn't you?
I wanted to, yes.
I know. And that's what you mean when you say that the disease beat you. Because you had to give in to advice.
Well, I don't think I actually sort of logically came to any kind of decision about it. You know, it was, once the sort of long-term care was mentioned, I sort of pushed it to the back of my mind because the horror of it, I just couldn't handle. I couldn't bear the thought of doing it. But other factors came into it. I mean, you know, Michael, as you know, supported me throughout and said that he would continue to support me. But it was clear, even in my state of pain, that he needed me back. He needed his house back. He needed his life back. And quite rightly so.
Because it took over completely, didn't it? Mum took
Entirely.
over. And not quite like a child, because a child would be recognising you. Whereas Mum began to be afraid.
Afraid of me.
Of you.
Yeah. She would recoil. If she called me in the night, she'd be screaming and crying, wringing her hands, saying, "Oh, God, help me. Where am I? Who am I?" And I'd walk down the stairs and she'd go, "Who are you?" You know, it's sort of pretty hard to handle, really, isn't it? You know, I mean, you sort of, this is your mother. But you take her back into the room, you put her back to bed, and almost immediately she starts again, saying exactly the same thing. This will go on for hours, days, weeks, months. Till in the end, you know, you're wiped out, don't you?
In fact, I mean, because she didn't have a memory, so she didn't have a memory from 1 minute to the next.
Yeah.
What I used to notice was I got up one night when I was staying, do you remember? Was that when I got into the room, which could have been you, could have been anybody, she didn't know who I was, and she said, "Oh, are you a nurse?" was that first thing. And that occurred to me then, Mum needs nursing. Because she couldn't be left on her own, could she? At all.
No,
so it wasn't humanly possible at that stage for you to keep going with her.
Well, you can't do 24-hour care, can you?
No, not as a person running another existence.
I think really also she needed a place of safety. You know, I don't mean that she wasn't safe in the house, but she needed somewhere where she was watched all the time and reassured all the time. But I think the real basic reason why I did actually sign was that I felt she needed to be with people like herself, so she didn't any longer have to compete with the real world, because there wasn't a real world for her anymore, was there?
No.
And she just couldn't cope with what she was encountering, where she was with people like herself. She didn't have to try, did she?
No, I actually hadn't dawned on me, because that in fact is because you mean she had to compete with you leading a normal life.
Compete with the entire surroundings she was in, the house she didn't recognise, the toilet she didn't know was a toilet, the toilet roll she didn't recognise as a toilet roll. You know, everyday objects in that house she no longer could place then. You know, she'd look at herself in the mirror, she'd say, "Who's that?" You know, she was lost in the house. She'd go in one room and she couldn't find her way back out. And she'd be terrified, screaming, crying, wringing hands. And, you know, it was obvious at some point that I couldn't reassure her then any longer that this was her home and she was safe.
But also, you had trouble, didn't you? Because when Mum got very, very disturbed and agitated, you then were told to administer drugs. Now, I found that really quite alarming.
Horrific.
Because you had, well, is it too dramatic to say they were dangerous anyway?
Oh, lethal. These were major drugs. So that, like, tranquilizers or medication come into two categories, minor and major. The minor are like Ativan, Valium, to give you a clue. So major is like what they'd administer to schizophrenics or people with, you know, serious mental disorders.
But you, without any training, without any supervision, it seemed to me, was giving it... that seems a very bad gap in the system.
And they wouldn't allow the nurses. No, the nurses that came around to bath Mum, they weren't allowed to touch a drug. They weren't allowed to give her a tablet.
Yeah. And yet suddenly you, who was not trained in any way, were allowed to do it.
Listen, also, I think that as the disease progresses, as you know, it becomes more alarming, the behaviour is bizarre, and... You know, as you say, you don't sleep, so you're tired, aren't you? So after sort of weeks and on nights of no sleep, and Mum really terrified, agitated, not being able to find the toilet, not being able to wipe herself, you know, and well, I mean, that's no big deal, but it still adds to it, you know.
Yes,
you've got to wipe the floors, wipe the walls, wipe the towel, you know. I mean, the major thing in that was there's no towels in the bathroom, wasn't there? You start to think, oh, she's really agitated. Did I give her that tablet last night?
Yes.
And then you think,
so you could easily overdose.
It's not working. I better give her another one. It's goes through your mind, you know, you're confused. I mean, I didn't, but that's not to say that I couldn't have.
No.
And it's a massive responsibility to place on somebody.
Could you have done, and this is just as a general help for carers, could carers do with help when they've made a decision, which is a big decision in our lives, to put your mother into a home?
Terrible decision.
Or father into a husband.
Terrible.
Now, do you think they need support?
Yes. I think there's a hole in the system again, and you fall through the net, and there isn't anybody there to catch you. Because one day your life is filled with masses of people, you know, daycare, nurses, CPNs, bath nurses, ambulance drivers, and then you get up and you scratch it and you think, where have they all gone?
Yeah, and
I'm sure I was here yesterday.
You were lonely.
Where are they?
Yeah, and lonely.
Oh, unbelievable.
And you've lost the point of your life, maybe, for a while.
I couldn't even see how I could ever regain my life again. I was glad I did it. I think I carried on longer than I should have, mine. But then we all do that.
Yeah, we all do that. But
hoping that you can, you know, build another layer of tolerance and see that next stage through. But at the end of the day, that disease beats you every time, doesn't it?
Well, that's why there's got to be a lot more support for it. Well, I'm really chuffed you come in today. Come back again. Come back again. So, and we'll get Mike and Jeff and Graham and get the whole family.
Everybody.
Thanks, Sylv. That's all we've time for today. Next week, I'm at the home of the novelist Monica Dickens. I'm not the only visitor. Her daughter and her twin grandsons will be there too, and the family will be talking across the generations. See you next week, same time, same place. Until then, good evening.
If you'd like to talk to someone about Alzheimer's disease, you can telephone the Alzheimer's Disease Society confidential helpline for the next 2 hours on 081 675 6557, or you can write to them at 158 to 160 Balham High Road, London, SW 12 9BN, or look in your local telephone directory for your local branch.